So let's get started. The first thing you want to do, and I've already done this, you can see, is give my surface a coat or two of bleached sand. And I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to get out my sanding block, and I just want to sand it lightly so I have a smooth painting surface. The next thing I want to do is I want to put out a puddle of Provence Sky, and you should still have some bleach sand on your palette. I also want to get out a couple of baby wipes, and I want to get out the background stencil that I'm going to use. This one is Tim Holtz. It's called Lattice Work. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take out a large flat brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin down that Provence blue. Get the palette there in the corner. Now I've done this once already. That's why I have such a big area of blue. I'm going to thin that down. Make it rather juicy because you need to cover this whole thing. And you're going to want to work kind of fast. And then I'm going to pick up some bleach sand just to lighten it up a little bit. And then what I want to do is I want to go to my piece, and I'm just going to quickly, it doesn't matter if it runs down the sides, it's all right, quickly cover this whole surface with this thin down Provence Sky and bleach sand mix. All right, now while this is still wet, what I want to do is I want to take a baby wipe, and I'm going to put my stencil down, and I like to call this my reverse stenciling, and I'm just going to blot the paint off from the stencil, and I get a nice little mottled look there, and I really like that. It makes a nice soft background. So you want to work as quickly as you can so that paint doesn't dry, and you can even rub. That goes faster than dabbing. And I don't want it all lined up, so I'm going to lay my stencil down in different directions so that it's not just all lined up. Okay, more little spot. And so that gives me a really nice, soft background, and that's just a way to do reverse stenciling. You might not need both baby wipes, but if you're like me, you can use the second one to clean your hands. All right, once you have that top done, you can paint the side of your piece if you want with that same Provence Sky bleach sand mix. Provence Sky by itself, I felt, was just a little too bright of a blue, and so the bleach sand toned it down just right. So I'm just going to paint those side edges real quick. In fact, if you wanted to, you could even do the reverse stenciling on the side edges too. Might look pretty. I'm going to leave mine just a solid color. All right, so I've dried this, so now I'm going to go ahead and put the pattern on for the jar. And I just want to put the jar on, and we're going to go right through the areas here, like where this lemon wedge is, and down through the leaves and the flower here to make it a complete jar. So I'll be back when I have that pattern on for that jar, and we'll get working on it. All right, I have the pattern on for the jar. I got a little carried away and put the lemon slice on too, but I'll just paint right through that. Now what I want to do is I want to make a wash, a heavy wash of sea glass And I'm going to paint in the jar with this wash of sea glass. Just paint in the whole thing. It doesn't matter if you're going over where the ice cubes are or anything like that. You just want to paint in the entire jar with a coat of a heavy wash of sea glass. So get yourself out a big brush and let's get that filled in. Shouldn't take too terrible long. You even want to do that neck of that jar. Don't forget that. And the inside edge. Okay. Kind of looks like a jar already. So we want to dry this, and then we'll come back and start. We'll do one shading to get started. And then we'll put our lemonade in the jar and our ice cubes and the straw. So let's get this dry, and then I'll be back. All right, we're going to float shading on this jar with some Laguna plus a bit of sea glass. So it's going to be 1 part Laguna to 1 part of sea glass. I'll get it right one of these days, probably by the end of the video. So blend it out really well. You want it to be a nice soft float. And I'm going to go around the whole jar. And I know you're thinking, oh, there's stuff in the jar. I wanted to get this initial shading done first because it's going to be behind some of the stuff. So you needed to have it in there. And just go all the way around the jar. Be sure to kind of walk that shade out in the corners of the jar. It helps to give it a little more dimension. And that was 1 part Laguna to 1 part sea glass. And I just brush mix. I don't make a puddle. I just corner load into Laguna and then corner load into sea glass. And go from there. I'm also going to do this float across the top edge. And I'm also going to go under the, I guess you'd call it the lip of the jar. It's kind of curved, so don't make it a straight line. And I also want to do it, oh, I'm in a little low there. Let's fix that. I also want to do it on the inside of the jar, the inside of the mouth. So you just kind of fill that top edge in. All right, so we got the start of our jar going. As long as we're working with that Laguna sea glass mix, we might as well come in again with our flat brush, corner loaded like we're going to do a float, but we're going to set in those ridges that are on the neck, the rim of the jar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay up on the chisel edge, and I'm just going to color to the outside, and I'm just going to pull a little bit more Laguna in there. Just going to pull some shading across to give it the idea that it has those ridges that jars have to screw the lids on. So just chisel edge and just kind of drag the color across. And we will come back in and line a highlight so those will stand out a little bit more. In fact, we can just do that right now. So you're going to need cool white. I haven't used mine in a while, so I need to shake it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cool white and a liner brush. This is a pretty small one. It's a 20-aught. And I'm going to pick up some cool white. And let me get a little tighter for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line a highlight, starting at the outside edge and pulling across. And see, that gives it that nice look like it has those ridges on there. I'm going to do that from both sides. They don't have to meet in the middle. It's okay if they don't. There, that gives you that nice look that it looks like you have ridges. So the next thing we need to do is we need to put the pattern on to show us that we have some lemonade in that jar. And this one, you're going to go right through the straw and right through the ice cube. And I'm going to go to this line that's going to be in the back here. All right. I'm trying to use white because I don't want it, and I really can't see it. Just a little bit more. Okay, I think I can see that. So I'm just going to reinforce that with a chalk pencil. And so then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to wash the lemonade in our jar. Okay, so just thin down some moon yellow and wash in the area that is lemonade. Now there's a lot of stuff that goes on top of this, so don't worry if your wash isn't like the same. I mean, if you have light spots and dark spots, that's perfectly fine. But if you go out above where your lemonade is supposed to be, you want to clean that up. All right, so we're going to dry this. We're going to put the pattern on for our straw and for our ice cubes. All right, so the pattern's on for the straw and the ice cubes. What I want to do first is base in that straw. I want it to be pretty straight, so I'm going to use some blue painter's tape. And I don't like to waste a lot of painter's tape, so I tore it in half, kind of. Not very well. And that way I only need to use one piece. So we'll get that taped off. You want to make sure your straw is stuck inside the lip of that jar. Okay. And then I'm just going to paint the straw. I'm going to avoid the rim, and I'm going to avoid the ice cubes when I paint in that straw. And I'm going to do that with cool white. So just a quick base coat. Let's see. Now on this, you're going to avoid this one ice cube that's sitting in the front, but the one that's behind it, the straw is actually in front of it. So I'm going to go ahead and base over that. Look at your pattern. That'll help you. And I'm going to guess at the length of the straw. If I put my pattern on darker, I would have known. So just make sure the straw is tucked inside the jar there. Let's see if I did an okay job. I think I did. Cool. So I want the straw to dry, but while it's drying, I'm trying to get this tape off of my fingers. I can go ahead and start floating in the ice cubes. And I'm just going to do that with a side load float of cool white. Blend it out so it's kind of soft. And I'm going to start with these back ones first. And I'm just going to float that cool white on to form those ice cubes. So anywhere you have an ice cube that's in the back, you want to do those first. This one that's behind the straw. And then I can come back and do the ones that are in front. Don't float them outside of the jar. Keep them in the jar. This one's in front of that straw. And then this one, almost got it done. I got a new refrigerator. It makes the coolest round ice cubes. I guess they're not cubes. I guess they'd be ice balls. Cracked ice. That's what they call it. But I didn't. I just went with this regular old rectangle ice. So I'm going to let that dry. Then we're going to come back and we're going to do a little bit more floating with cool white and maybe a little dry brushing too. All right, so these are dry now. So what I want to come in and do is I want to float some cool white. And it's a little bit heavier float than what you did to form the ice cubes. So a little bit more paint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be giving these ice cubes some edges. You know, you can make them straight, or you can kind of wiggle them a little bit to make them look a little cracked or whatever. But just go through and just add some edges to these ice cubes. You can look at your picture or your pattern. No, yeah, your pattern or your picture. Wasn't sure I had them on the pattern. And decide where you're going to put them, or you can just wing it. But anyway, you just want to give them some edges. They're not just flat pieces of ice. They have actual edges. Okay, last one. All right. So then what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to separate these ice cubes from each other a little bit. So I'm going to come in with just a little bit of Laguna, not too much. And I want to blend it out really well. And all I'm going to do is very softly float to separate these. You can soften it. See, I softened it with my finger. I use my finger like a mop brush just to separate them from each other. And you can also, where there's an ice cube, you can also float next to this straw. Just to separate the ice cube from the straw. So it doesn't take very much. Make this guy on the top. And I'm going to add a little bit over here just to keep it away from the edge of the glass. And a little bit over here. Okay, so we've separated our ice cubes a little bit. Okay, so let's work on our straw a little bit. Back up so I can get the whole thing in there. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some thin royal fuchsia and I'm going to line some little stripes, thin little stripes on my straw. So you want to use your tiny liner. This is a 20-aught. And I'm going to turn this so it is easier for me. And it's a straw. It's round. So these aren't just going to be straight slashes. You want to curve them just a little bit. Just ever so slightly. Curve these little stripes down the straw. And of course, when you get to the rim, you stop and continue on the other side of the rim. They're not curved a lot, just enough to keep the illusion that the straw is round. I'm going to skip that ice cube and continue on the other side, all the way down. Once we get these stripes on, we want to let them dry. So what we'll do is we'll come in and we will shade our lemonade a little bit. And also one thing that I forgot to do, that big a deal, we want to add the bottom of the jar in. So I'm just going to take a very soft float of Laguna, which you already have on your palette, and I'm just going to float in the bottom of that jar. So it's just a slight float, so it gives the idea that the straw is resting in the bottom of the jar. Okay, it's not a big deal. I probably got that bottom a little wide, but it'll be okay. Clean it up, shorten it a little bit. Just a hint of shading down here to give the look that there's a bottom in that jar. Okay. So now you want to get out some honey brown, and we're going to float a little bit of shading on our lemonade itself with some very well blended out honey brown. So I'm going to go under the ice cubes very softly. When there's a little V area, I want to walk that color out a little bit. And then I'm going to come down one side of the straw, across the bottom of the straw. This is a very, very soft float, soft as you can get it. Up the other side. And this is only where ice cubes or the straw is on the lemonade. Okay, it's not up in this jar area. It's just where there's lemonade. And I also want to tuck a little bit in across the top here. You can see just a little V of lemonade there. And maybe some right here. And definitely here in this corner, okay? I'm also going to float this down the side edges. So, and then in these corners here too. So I might start down here and just a nice soft float. And again, walking it around that corner a little bit. And then down this side. This one I'm going to go on top of the ice cube because it's dunked in the, I guess I could put it on the camera. I went on top of this ice cube because it's kind of dunked into the lemonade a little bit. So just nice soft little floats of lemonade. So now I can go back to my straw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Provence blue. I'm trying to sound French. Provence blue. And I'm going to float some shading. And it's actually going to go on each long side. So you don't need a very large float. Just the corner. And you're just going to go up both sides of the straw with this Provence blue. So I'm going to go to the other side. See, I'm just kind of tucking the corner of my brush along that edge. That's how I can get away with floating both sides at the same time. This side and this side. I also want to float a little bit of this above where it goes in the jar, above that ice cube and below that ice cube that is on top of it, okay? You're going to come back with your liner brush and a little bit of thin Provence blue. And you want to fill in the inside of the straw at the top. Okay, so just a little oval to fill in the inside of the straw. Then you're going to come back with your liner brush and some thin, cool white. And we're going to line a highlight up the straw. So it's not quite center, it's a little bit left of center. But you just want to line this highlight all the way up the straw. All right. Cool. I also want to line a little bit of cool white across the top edge of the straw. Just to reinforce that a little bit. Okay, so we're going to let that straw dry. In fact, I'll just dry it really quick here. And then we're going to come back with our wash of Moon Yellow. And we're going to add the lemonade that goes over the straw and over these ice cubes. So I want to get out my big brush again. You can use a smaller one, but big one works easier. And I'm going to thin down some Moon Yellow again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do that wash of Moon Yellow over my ice cubes. And down the side of the jar again. See where we needed to put some of this shading in before. I got this a little heavy, I think. So we'll work with it. And again, it doesn't have, you don't have to worry if it's got light spots and dark spots. It did come out of the jar a little bit over here. And clean that up. So I want to let that dry, and then we'll come back and we'll do some dry brush highlighting on our jar, maybe even a little dry brush shading, and then we'll put the glass of the jar that's in front on. All right, so now we're going to come back and we're going to put the front part of the glass jar on. So you're going to need your big flat brush again and some thin down sea breeze, which was the color we did our jar in to begin with. And I'm going to start right up under the lip of the jar, up in the neck, and I'm just going to do a wash of sea breeze over the jar, over the straw, over the ice cubes. So now I have the front of my jar on there. So when this dries, we're going to come back. We're going to do some dry brush highlighting, and we're going to come back and do some shading. Okay, so now we want to dry brush some highlighting and a little bit of shading onto our jar. So I'm going to use my favorite brush to dry brush with, which is a Langnickel short round sable. We call it Sable Tech. And I'm going to pick up some cool white, and I'm going to dry brush some highlighting down this left side of the jar. I'm going to follow the shape of the jar. So I'm going to start in the neck area, and then I'm going to come down this left side. I'm going right over everything. So a smaller brush so it runs out of paint a little quicker. And I'm going to come around into this corner, and I'm going to curve it around the bottom a little bit. Okay? And in my head, I'm hearing you all say, okay. And then what I want to do is I want to go to that other corner of the jar. I'm not going all the way across the bottom. I'm not going all the way up the right side, but I want to touch a little bit of highlights in this corner, and also up here in this, what I'm going to call a corner. So it doesn't go all the way down. It just kind of goes in the right side corners, right? So then I'm going to clean this brush out, and what I want to do is I want to dry brush some shading in this neck area. And I'm going to do that with straight Laguna. I'm not going to add anything to it. And I'm just going to deepen the shading in the neck, going right across that straw. Okay, so I've done that. So then one of the very next things I want to do is I want to float some Laguna down the sides of my jar. So I'm shading the front glass portion of the jar. So straight Laguna again. I'm going to start up here at the neck. I'm just going to float this shading all the way down the jar, across the ice cubes and over the lemonade. I'm going to walk it out in this corner here. I'm also going to come across the bottom. And then I'm going to come on the other side of the jar with this shading. So again, starting up at the neck, down the sides of the jar. And I'm going to walk that out in that corner there a little bit. And also touch a little bit of this shading on the rim of the jar, on the sides of the rim. Just a little bit. So we need to deepen the inside, the mouth of the jar a little bit. So I'm going to do that with a float or two of mermaid tail. If you don't have mermaid tail, You could use peacock teal and add a little Hauser dark green to it. But I'm just going to come in here and deepen this inside the mouth of this jar. And that includes floating a little shading right next to that straw. Okay, that looks a little better. Makes it look like it's actually going inside the jar. I also want to take my liner brush and a little bit of cool white. And I just want to carry this top rim around the back of the jar. So very lightly, a very thin line of cool white, just to carry that top rim around the back of the jar. Okay, now we are going to come back and we're going to do another float down the sides of the jar. This time we're going to do it with sea breeze, just straight sea breeze, and it's going to be just a hair inside the edge of that Laguna float that we did. So straight sea breeze, a side load float. I'm going to start again up here at the neck. I'm starting just a hair away from the edge. And I'm staying away from the edge all the way down this jar. So I get to the bottom. And I don't go across the bottom. I just kind of stop, curve it off into the bottom. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'll pull it from the bottom this time. So just hair inside the edge. And coaxing it on there. And stopping at the neck of the jar. So I think that we can pretty much call this done. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take a larger flat brush and we're going to float some shading on our background around this jar and the straw with some of that Provence blue. I'm going to say it as many different ways as I can. So I'm going to start up here and I'm just going to come down on the background next to the jar and just make it pop off the background a little bit. And across the bottom. All the way around the jar. You can go right through where that lemon slice is going to be. We'll shade around it later. Kind of wiped out my top edge, but it'll be all right. I think it looks just fine. So I'm going to go around my straw. And call it done. Okay, good job on the jar. So we're going to let this dry. We're going to put the pattern on for our lemon. And again, when you put the pattern on for the lemon, you want, and you can put it on for the lemon slice, you want to just ignore those flowers that are on top. So we'll paint the whole lemon, and then we'll come back and add the flowers later. So I'll be back once my pattern's on. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to base in the lemon wedge and the lemon itself with moon yellow. So I'm going to do that real quick and I'll be back. All right, so we need to float some shading around this lemon wedge and around the lemon itself with Provence Sky. And then we're also going to come back and deepen the shading around the jar with floats of Moody Blue. So first we'll do Provence Sky around the lemon and the lemon wedge. Just to kind of pop it off the background. You need to soften, I needed to soften a little bit of the floating here above the jar. I'm just going to continue this blue floating around this lemon wedge. And I'm going to go around the lemon itself. And you notice it's not opaque. It doesn't have to be. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on top. As I throw things around, and you can see too that I based right through where those flowers are going to be on top. It's just easier than trying to base around each one of those petals. Okay, now I'm going to dry this floating around the lemon wedge. And then I'm going to come back and do a float of Moody Blue around that just to bring it further off the background. Just blend out the Moody Blue really well. You don't want this to be a dark blue line, a dark blark. You don't want it to be a dark blue line. You just want it to be a little bit darker float, just to sink the background back a little bit more. All the way around this jar, and go ahead and go around that lemon wedge too. All right, cool. Doesn't that make that pop off the background just a little bit more? All right, now before I work on the lemon wedge and the lemon, what I want to do is I want to brighten up this background just a little bit more than it is now. I didn't want to do this before because I didn't want it to fight with the jar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my punchinello and some cool white, and my favorite stencil brush, which happens to be Chris Hoy's spectacular stencil brush. And I'm just going to randomly stencil this background full of cool white bunches of dots. They don't have to be all lined up straight. That gets boring. But see, that's going to pop that background, lighten it up a little bit. Give it a little bit more interest. And it's going to give it the lettering and something, and the flowers and everything, a background that they're going to fit on a little bit nicer. They're going to pop off of it a little bit nicer. And it just kind of varies the background even a little bit more. And you can put as much of this as you want on here. You don't have to limit it to just a few spaces. I'm going to go pretty heavy on it. Just another layer to add some interest. And I'm really liking that because it's even making the jar stand out a little bit more. And you work so hard on that jar that you might as well be able to see it, right? All right, cool. So set that punchinello aside and wash out your stencil brush. And we'll get to work on the lemon and lemon wedge next. All right, let's get to work on this lemon and lemon slice. The first thing you want to do is you want to dry brush some highlighting in the upper 2/3, say, of the lemon. So I'm just going to dry brush cool white on my highlight. Just to brighten up the top of that lemon a little bit. And you can also go ahead and dry brush some highlighting on the slice. We may lose this, but just in case it peeks through a little bit, that'd be great. All right. So then we want to do is, we want to float some Hauser medium green onto our lemon. I don't know about you, but we used to have a lemon tree, and there was always just a hint of green on there. So I'm going to float just a touch of Hauser medium green. And I'm going to keep it over here in the left half of the whole lemon. Get it down on that little nub. I've got a little hair thing there. All right. Try this again. Down on the little nub. And across the bottom a little bit. I still have that little hair. That doesn't want to cooperate with me and disappear today. So I just want to tint that one side. And I'm also going to go ahead and float a little bit of this on my lemon slice. I'm going to put it here. Down there in that little corner. And I'll probably do a little bit, not probably, I will do a little bit up here. Just to give it a little tint of green. Okay. So then we want to do is we want to get out some burnt orange. And we're going to add a little bit of burnt orange color to the lemons. Just need a little dot. And the burnt orange, we're going to keep it over here right side towards the bottom of this lemon. You want to blend it out really well. You don't want this to be a real stark orange shade. You just want to give it a little tint of orange. And that might be a little much, but I think we can work with it. Especially if I go in and mop it out a little bit. Okay. Already looks better already. And again, we're going to add a little bit of this to the slice. So we're going to come back with some burnt umber, but what I want to do is I want to dry these, the green and the orange floats first. And what we're going to do is we're going to float shading all the way around the full lemon, and with some very, very well blended out burnt umber. Okay, you don't want this to be real dark brown or anything like that. Just a touch of burnt umber. And we're also going to float that on the slice, but in a different way. I'll show you that when we get to the slice. So for right now, you just want to corner load and blend it out really well so it's a nice soft float. And you're just going to go all the way around that lemon, keeping it nice and soft. All right, there we go. And mop it and soften it even just a little bit more. And now on the slice, what I want to do is I want to set in the peeling. So what I'm going to do is another soft float of burnt umber. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set in the peeling, the space here. I'm just going to go all the way around with this float of burnt umber and give myself peeling edge. And don't worry, we're going to come back and line some highlighting on this slice so it won't look so brown and dirty. So just give yourself the peeling like that. All right, sounds good to me. So I'm going to come back to this lemon down here. This guy's almost done. And I just want to come back and I want to stipple some cool white highlighting on there, because I want it to have a little bit more texture. So I'm just going to come with my brush that I like to do dry brushing with, and this time I'm going to use it as a stippler. And I'm just going to stipple some cool white back into that area that I dry brushed, warm white, just to give it some texture. So we're going to call this guy done, and we're going to go work on our slice. So I'll get a little closer on it. So what I want to do now is I want to, with my liner brush and cool white, I want to line those sections of the lemon slice. So the center's not exactly on the corner of the glass jar, so just give yourself a little dot for your center. And then just give yourself, it's kind of thick in between, it's that white stuff that's in between. And it also gets lined right next to that brown float that we just did. You want to do that. And then add the sections. I got that one a little wide. That'll be okay. I think it's going to be just fine. What I always say. All right, slowly but surely. Starting to look like a lemon slice. So now what I want to do is I want to come back with some moon yellow. Mine's all dried out. Get a little dot of it here. What I want to do is I want to take my liner brush, load it with some moon yellow, kind of wipe it out so it's not so wet. And then I'm going to line some yellow back into the skin, the edge, the rim of it. And it doesn't have to be opaque. But we want to put that yellow back in there. And then I also want to pick up some warm white. And I want to line a little bit of a highlight on the skin or the rind. Is that what it's called? The rind. Okay. So let's dry that. So now I'm going to come back with a flat brush, and I want to float some very well blended out burnt orange in the wide part of those sections. Just a touch of burnt orange in those sections. There we go, almost. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my liner brush and some thin moon yellow, and from the center I'm going to pull some moon yellow just to yellow those sections back up. What do they say? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I really feel like my rind is still a little too dark. So I'm going to come back and add a little bit more yellow to it. Just to lighten it up a little bit. And then of course come back with a little bit of warm white. So we have one more little thing to do to this. I'm going to dry it. And then what we're going to do is we are going to come back and float some shading on the lemon slice next to the jar with some very well blended out burnt umber. Just to set it down into the jar a little bit. Just a little bit there. And then here, along the side edge of the mouth of the jar. All right. So I think we can call that done. So now what we want to do is we want to go put the pattern on for our flowers. And if you want to go ahead and put the pattern on for your lettering, you can do that too. So I'll be back once I have that pattern on. There's one little thing I forgot to do to this lemon. And what we want to do is we want to take our flat brush, corner load into cool white. And what we want to do is we want to float a little highlight on this little nub. Okay. And it's like a little C-stroke, just to make the nub stand out a little bit more. All right, you should have the pattern on for your leaves and for your flowers. And your leaves, you want to go ahead and base them in with a coat or two of Hauser light green. We want to paint those first because they're tucked up underneath the flowers. So it's just easier than painting around the flowers, because your flowers are just going to look so great. You don't want to muff them up by painting leaves and tucking it in there. Only 3 of them, so shouldn't take too terrible long to paint. Okay, so I did 2 coats of Hauser light green. And I'm going to dry this real quick so that I can work on them. And I want to get out some Hauser dark green. And I also want to get out a little bit of moon yellow. Look, you can't get in yours. I can't get in mine. So Hauser dark green and some fresh moon yellow. And what we want to do first is we want to float some highlighting on our leaves with moon yellow and our flat brush. Just a nice float across the top edge of each leaf. It will kind of blend itself into the, sorry about that. It will kind of blend itself into the lemon a little bit, but that'll be okay. So I'm going across the top edge. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across the top of the center vein line, just to float that in. Just your basic leaves, nothing fancy. We're not going to make them too terribly involved. We've done enough work, I think, already. And so I'm going to shade on my leaves with Hauser dark green, of course. That's why I put it out there, right? So I'm going to go across the bottom of this leaf with Hauser dark green. And then again, I'm going to come it through the center to shade that. One more. It wasn't too terrible hard. And then what I want to do is I want to corner load my flat brush into some Hauser dark green and blend it just like I was going to float. But I'm not going to float. What I'm going to do is tighten up on these leaves a little bit. I'm going to stay up on the chisel edge with the color next to that center vein line, and I'm just going to set down the little, I don't know what they're called, the little veins that come off the side of the center. On both sides. See, I went off the leaf a little bit, but I can clean that up really quick. The other side, so they look a little more like leaves now. I guess I should probably put my color where it's supposed to be. Okay. And then I have one more thing I want to do. Let me dry those little center things. I want to float some Hauser dark green at the base of each leaf. So just a quick little float of Hauser dark green across the base. And that's going to help to tuck those leaves behind the flowers. All right, cool. Easy peasy little leaves. Now our flowers, well, let's go ahead and base those in with bleached sand, which was our base coat color on our thing originally. So I'm going to base those in with bleached sand, and I'll be back. Okay, now that we have the flowers painted in, I was looking at the leaves, and I thought they needed just something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my liner brush and some warm white, not thin down, straight paint. And on each of those, in between each of those vein lines, I'm just going to stroke a little bit of moon yellow. Did I say warm white? I meant moon yellow. Take a little bit of moon yellow and just add a little bit of highlight in between those vein lines, just to perk up those leaves a little bit. Okay, I think that helps them stand out a little bit more. What do you think? The next thing I want to do is I want to thin down some royal fuchsia, make kind of a heavy wash, and I'm going to wash over the petals of these flowers just to pink them up a little bit. I wanted the bleached sand behind to act as a block for the paint, the stuff that's behind. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to give each petal a wash of royal fuchsia. And they don't have to all be the same color. I mean, one can be darker, one can be lighter. It's okay. And even Got a little too much water there. I'm going to start with this back one, mainly because it's in the back. They're going to look better already. And on to the other two. And then you're going to want to dry these really good because we have some dry brushing to go on top of them and some tints and shading. So you want them to be good and dry. So once you get the wash on these petals, you can go ahead and dry them. Streaks and stuff are okay. Just adds to the petal. Almost done. Last petal. Okay, so I want this to dry and then we'll come back and start doing our highlighting and tints. Let's get to work on these flowers. So I washed royal fuchsia on top of all the petals, and I went ahead and put the pattern on to separate the flowers from each other. So one of the first things I want to do is to dry brush some moon yellow on my flowers, mainly through the center area. Get yourself a nice dry brush and some moon yellow. And let's add some color to these guys. So I'm going mainly in the center area. With the moon yellow. They're looking better already. Then what I want to do is I want to dry brush some cool white on the petals, and that's going to be more towards the outside edges a little bit. Let's get some cool white out on our palette. This is another dry brush. Now I'm not going to do these petals on that back flower that are way underneath because I want them to be in the background anyway. So no need highlighting them up if I'm just going to shade them down. All right, so now I want to drop especially this flower that's in the back, into the background. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to float some shading on it with Royal Fuchsia. So just a corner load float of Royal Fuchsia to start putting that flower into the background. I'm going to go on the petals that are behind the other flowers first. Okay, so it's already looking like it's a little bit in the behind, in the background. Now on these other flowers and on these top petals, I'm going to float to start setting in the curled edges of the flowers. And again, with the focus out. So what I'm doing is I'm floating inside, but staying a little off the edge so that I can get that fold over on my petals. And I'm going to do that on all of the flowers. And it doesn't have to be the same side that I choose, but you can put your little floats wherever you like. It's not much of a float, really. These flowers are so tiny. I'm liking that. I'm going to go and do these. Luckily, these flowers only have 5 petals, so you can get through them pretty quickly. And if you decide you want to make both edges of the flower petal curl, you can do that too, just by adding a little float on the other side. Let's see. I think I'll go on this side on this one. And right here. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to add a little bit more color into these flowers. So I'm going to take some burnt orange and do a very well blended out float of burnt orange on some of the petals. Let's see, I'm going to dry these floats first. And then I'm going to get my burnt orange. And that brings some of the burnt orange that we had in our lemons into another part of the design. So I think I really, really want to add it to this larger flower. Just to give it a little different look than the other 2 flowers. And I'll add just a touch here and there on this flower. Maybe just 3 of the petals. I'm not even going to touch the back back flower because I'm going to shade that back down again. So what I want to do now is I want to take a liner brush and I want to line those curled edges of the petals. So I'm going to take a little bit of royal fuchsia, which was the base color, and then lighten it up with some cool white to get a lighter value royal fuchsia. And I'm just going to come along those curled edges and kind of reinforce them and make them stand out a little bit more. And if you wanted to add more, you could do that here. You could, add more curves and curls on your petals just by adding this line in a few extra places. I'm going to do this on the back one also, where I can see the curls. But it's not so much that it's going to pull that flower completely forward. And let's get to our big flower. And we will come back and highlight some of these curls. Okay. So now I want that to dry before I come back in with my deeper shading. We're going to come in with some floats of red violet and deepen the shading on that back flower just to tuck it back a little bit further. So I want to deepen the shading that's already there. And I'm also going to do a little bit of the stain on the chisel edge to put in some little detail lines around the centers of each flower. And that's with red violet too. So it's a corner lobe float, but you get up on the chisel edge, color next to the center, and just kind of set down some little wrinkles or lines from the center of the flower out. Okay, so now we want to come back with our liner brush and cool white, and on these front two flowers we're going to brighten up those folds. See if I can still get in my cool white. So I'm going to highlight these little fold overs on the front two. And that's with cool white in your liner brush. Kind of give them a little ruffly edge. All right. Now I do need to lighten up this back one a little bit, but I don't want it to be as bright as the front one, so I'm going to add just a little bit of royal fuchsia. So it's not quite as bright, but it's brighter than the royal fuchsia we started with on those. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to take my liner brush and pick up some red violet, and I'm going to just tap in the centers on these flowers. Okay, I'm liking that pretty much. And then I just want to pop a little more yellow on this smaller front flower. So I'm going to do a quick little side load float of very well blended out moon yellow. And I'm just going to kind of tap that around the center. Now these are your flowers. So if you want to make one of them more white, you can add more white to your flower. You know, you could come in and dry brush a little bit more warm white. But I felt like I just wanted to add some more moon yellow to this flower. Okay, I like that pretty much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Hauser medium green and I'm going to make a wash out of it. I'm going to thin it down quite a bit. I just want to add some tints of Hauser medium green through this bottom background area. It doesn't need to be real strong, but I just want to add some of that green into the background just to give those flowers and the lemon and the jar kind of a place to sit down, to settle in. And I just think that kind of helps to ground it a little bit. And then if you want to, you can come with a light wash of moon yellow and add some sunlight up in this upper left corner. All right, so let's back up and take a look at our piece. I really like that. So we need to do our lettering, and we haven't brought any black in, so I don't want to use black on it. You could use burnt umber. You could use the moody blue. I think I'm going to go with burnt umber just to pull some of the burnt umber from the lemons into the lettering. And then we need to add a little stripe around the side edges just to kind of finish it off and pull the interest into the center a little bit, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to get out some burnt umber. And I'm going to do my lettering. No stencil for this one. I'm just going to do it with a liner brush and some thinned burnt umber. All right, so I decided to make it easy on myself with this border stripe. And I'm going to go ahead and use my paint marker pen so I can use a ruler. And that way the stripe won't take away from the design too much. It'll just add to it. So if you have a nice paint pen that you like to use, go ahead and grab that, or you could do this with a liner brush, and you could also do it with any color off the palette that you want. I have these Panda Fly paint marker pens on my website if you're interested in those. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to just add my stripes, or my border stripe anyway, with my Panda Fly white paint pen. I want that to dry before I lay my ruler over it again. Corner there. So we'll just fudge it in. And last line. Okay. I think one more thing to do, and we can call this thing done. And it's something I do to all my lettering, and that's just to add a nice shadow on the background next to the lettering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a wash of some Provence blue. I need to go to Europe and learn how to say that right. And I'm going to take my liner brush, same one I used to line the lettering with. And if you painted with me before, you know the drill. Thin it down and add a shadow on the background next to the lettering on the top and left side. And if you'd like this shadow to be a little darker, you could go in and do it with Moody Blue, but I wanted to keep it a little less obtrusive. So that's why I went with the Provence too. I just want to say that color one more time. So again, this will probably be another fast forward moment. But you can see it kind of pops the lettering off the background a little bit more. Alrighty, I'm going to call this guy done. I hope you enjoyed painting this along with me, and I hope that you do make your life sweet.